All right, guys. Class is in session. Class is in session. We are rolling. We are rolling. It's been a slow-ish day for me. Not slow in terms of work, but I had a long walk. So I kind of mentioned this offhand recently, but I'm doing a. Hey, how you guys doing? I'm doing a spiritual retreat, third weekend in September. It's going to be bookending the Virgo new moon and the equinox, and I'm going to be doing the Appalachian Trail by myself. I'm going to be doing it fasted. So it'll be a week-long trek. It's about 74 miles. So, I walk a lot, and I've just started walking more with weighted stuff, but obviously it's a different scale, especially when the fasting comes into play. So I'm starting to practice, and I got about 2 weeks to go until this stuff. Um, be a good time to clear out everything. Gonna make sure to have my use my homemade my cinchona bark to make my homemade hydrochloroquine so I can decalcify my pineal gland. You guys like that? It's a COVID cabal. I can talk about that. I'm gonna decalcify my pineal on that trek. I don't know if I'm gonna do that or not, but I'm. It's gonna be a fun trip. It's gonna be a fun trip. Well, yeah. I mean, I feel great. I'm just I'm a little bit tired because I did 14 miles with 36-pound vest, and I'm gonna do one more of those, and then bump it up to 48 and do that twice, and then I'm off. And hopefully the pack should be down to only like 20 something, like 25 pounds. I'm gonna try to keep it light. I have to bring food, so I can keep it pretty light. Just because it does add up on you over time. But I'm trying to practice with heavier weights so that the lighter weight doesn't feel as big of a deal. Anyway, but I'm moving slower. It's one of those days like you get that kind of exercise. You're walking for 4.5 hours, and you're like you feel good, but you kind of just want to sleep. Everything moves a little bit slower. So anyway, first day of wine school. School is in session. I think I'm going to even take it horizontal. Can I do that? And take it horizontal. School is in session. Okay, so what we have today is we're doing Rioja. So some little bit of background on Rioja. Okay, then we're doing the Marquis. I'm going to say Marquis de Riscal. I'm going to say it with a French accent because I'm terrible at doing the Spanish one. Very, very good estate. Very old estate. So what's the story with Rioja? So what's the deal with this region? So Rioja, I'm going to show you on the map first. Okay, so Rioja. This is a topographical map of the wine region, which you don't need to know necessarily. It's a little bit too in detail. But let's take us to Spain itself. So you can see on a map of Spain, Rioja is here. Okay? So why is this significant? What does it tell us about this area? Why is it a good place to grow wine? Well, there's a couple of reasons. One, it has very good elevation, especially in the west. Okay, and as we know, elevation is very good for growing wine because elevation. Well, I can even just read this here. Great advantages are altitude and latitude, right? So I promise I wasn't plagiarizing that, but but basically, with the higher altitude, you're able to get more acidity for the wines. Uh, you might have the downside of them not being able to ripen as much, but they can be a little bit more nuanced and sophisticated. And also, there's a bit more water, so you don't have to deal with drought. And so, but the other thing is, what is the special thing about this area called Rioja? Which, by the way, called Rioja because of La Hoja River, which is a tributary around here of the Ebro. Okay, so that's the name. Rioja comes from Rio Hoja. But the soil in western, well, let me go into this first, the geography. Okay, so the reason it works is because this is the Basque country, okay? And actually, part of Rioja Altavesa, is actually technically under Basque administration. Although in practice, it's effectively the same thing as Rioja Alta. Okay, Rioja Alta and Rioja Altavesa are blocked by a huge mountain range right here. Okay, I'm blanking on the name of them. I guess they're going to tell me right here. Maybe it's the Cantabrica. Maybe that's it. At any rate, that matters because you get tons and tons of rain coming off the Bay of Biscay, tons and tons of rain that just hit the mountains and don't come into the valley, and don't just, the winds don't mess up the, because if you have that level of wet wind coming in, it's just not good for grapes. I mean, grapes need some water, but you don't want to give them too much water if you want them to be looking really good. So it has a very blessed location, especially in the West, and we have evidence of it being used all the way since Roman times. During the Muslim conquest of Iberia, winemaking continued there. It was tolerated and really flourished after the Reconquista. And as in France and as in Germany, the winemaking really took off there. At first, was helped to be cultivated and expanded by the monks, because of course they would grow vines for sacrament. So most of what we know about winemaking actually comes from monks. They're mostly, some of the best records of this happened in Western Germany and Eastern France, sort of like the Burgundy, Mosel region, because the monks would take meticulous details about the rain and about when the harvest, going all the way back to 900s. Rioja they did the same thing all over the place. So Rioja benefited from that. But where did the Rioja really benefit? Rioja really benefited because of France's misfortune. So there had started to be some bodegas created in the 1840s and 1850s. Rioja really took off because in the 1850s to 1860s through 1870s, you had the phylloxera epidemic. Now, I've talked about phylloxera before, but it bears mentioning again because its importance on the history of wine can't be understated. Basically, phylloxera is a mite, a little bug that attacks the roots predominantly of vines and kills them. Phylloxera comes from North America, so it was brought over to Europe from America. And it pretty much killed every single vineyard in Europe, and it went like a plague across Europe in the 1800s. There was other things, there was mildews, but those would reduce yields. Phylloxera just killed the vineyards. And so you had a situation where Bordeaux was pretty much producing no more wine. And so all these, for a period of time, they figured out a solution. Thank you. Yeah, that's the haircut. The haircut helps. I was getting a bit scruffy. So basically, you had all of these vignerons from France were like, well, man, we can't do anything here. So where can we go that phylloxera hasn't hit that has some pretty good potential? That's not too far away. And so they said, oh, well, we'll go right across the Pyrenees Mountains into Spain, and we'll go check out this area, Rioja. And this was huge for Rioja because the French are the elite winemakers, guys. They're the elite. Look, I hate to say it. There's a wonderful wine made all over. And, as you guys have known from my prior Periscopes, I've been quite impartial recently to Italian wine. But I mean, the French are the experts. It's like they got it in their blood. France is probably the best place in the world to produce wine, especially a variety of wine. They probably can hit every single style in the world. No other country can do that. So, I'm a bit of a Francophile, I suppose you could say. But anyway, they took this area, Rioja, which was sort of making a lot of peasant wine, and they brought a little bit of the French finesse to it. And turned it into a real powerhouse, and that by the end of the 1900s, by the end of the century, so around 1900, when the French went back to Bordeaux, things were very different. Well, so California actually can't do that because California is too hot. So California does not have the climatic variation of France, and we'll talk more about that when we do wine school on France. But France has, if you go, the difference between the Loire Valley and Bordeaux and southern France. Also, geologically, you have pretty much every single soil type in the entire world just in France. I read a book on the geology of France and its relationship to wine, and it was really spectacular. I mean, just so fascinating. So it's a place that can produce a really, really, rich and juicy Chateauneuf de Pape, and it can also produce a very light and tart champagne. And you just can't see other countries do that to the same extent. To the same extent of quality too, right? Maybe they can make a tart wine, but it's not going to be the same quality level. So, but Rioja is pretty much considered to be the best of Spain. We're gonna get to COVID, but guys, remember we're doing wine school now, so we got a little bit more time going on here. I got this nice stuff for you. I got this, doing all the research. So I'm just gonna talk a little bit more about Rioja, and then we're gonna drink it, and then we're gonna talk about satanic pedophiles. Okay, so just a couple more minutes. So Rioja is probably the best region in Spain. There's a lot of regions that produce great stuff, and we're going to be trying them over the coming weeks. I'm not doing AirPods. AirPods melt your brain. I have AirPods. I don't use them because I hate the way I feel when I use them. So we have Priorat, which we'll be talking about, which is more in Catalonia. But Rioja is it's the traditional region. Now, okay. So, yeah, Carlo Rossi. So Rioja traditionally was made very, very thin. Okay, it was made very, very thin, and it was aged a very, very long time in oak, and usually American oak traditionally. And so the wine actually is not what you imagine it to be today traditionally. It had a much paler complexion. Like, so for instance, you look at this isn't too pale of a wine. And granted, they would get paler as they aged. This isn't super aged. It's not aged, but it's not super aged. An old one would be much, much paler. But the wine has how do I put this? It used to be just very, very vanilla. And I remember having it in classes. We try it. And I don't really like it, to be honest. I don't like this traditional style of Rioja. Of course, I love to see at least some cuvées continue to create that style because it's historical. But I'm not a big fan on things that taste like vanilla. I prefer my wine to taste like fruit. Prefer to have more of a juiciness to it, and to have the vanilla, to the extent that it's there, be an accent and an augmentation rather than to be the leading character, so to speak. And gradually, this is what occurred in Rioja. The more recent styles are much more fruit forward, and their aging is not done as much in American barrels. They're done more in French barrels. French barrels are not as French oak, rather, is what I mean when I say French barrels. French oak is not as vanilla-y. It's not as rich as American oak. American oak also gets a lot of coconut flavor, but American oak, to me, it's overpowering. French is a little bit more delicate. And yeah, they do more stuff out of bottle and more stuff in older oak. And so the wine it's got a lot more fruit flavor. And when you've probably had a Rioja, you've probably experienced that. You probably haven't experienced this old style. Now, there is also white Rioja. We'll tackle that next time. But, okay, so last little bit on Rioja here before we drink and we talk about it. So Rioja, there's three primary styles of it, or categories. So you have Joven, which means pretty much straight off out of the press. That means there's no oak treatment, and that's not really put out for export. That's what the locals drink, and it's probably like $2 chuck over there. The main things you're going to get Crianza, and you're going to get Reserva, and you're going to get Gran Reserva. Now, I didn't bring out a Crianza. Frankly, Crianza's fine, totally fine for drinking, but for our purposes of comparison, Crianza and Reserva are relatively similar, and it just doesn't. We're not going to do more than 2 wines per periscope. It's too much. And so Reserva has 1 year aged in oak, and Reserva is aged 1 year in oak and aged 1 year in bottle. Meanwhile, Gran Reserva, and I think I have to remember this correctly, Gran Reserva is aged 2 years in oak and 3 years in bottle. So Gran Reserva spends at least 5 years. Reserva spends at least 2 years. basically aging, and Crianza is only 1. They all get oak treatment though. So anyway, the grapes here mostly Tempranillo. Tempranillo is the star of Rioja reds. You also get some Grenache, and there's a couple other varietals like Macabayo. It's not worth talking about; they're very marginal. Tempranillo is mostly what you're getting, and as you go further east and it gets hotter, you're going to start to use grapes like Grenache that do better with warmer temperature. So I'm just going to show you real quick here. So our vineyard is right here near the Baños de Ebro, as you can see. Actually, it's a little bit further over at El Ciego. So it's right over here, and it's a classic one. It's a classic Rioja estate made in 1860, and you can see up here. This is the Basque region. You can see up here. This soil is all clay and limestone. Mostly limestone in the Basque, mostly clay up here. Both of which are good. Limestone's very good for wine, but as you go down here, it gets more fertile, and so it's not quite as good for the winemaking. All right, so let's try it. Let's try it. By the way, if you guys want to get this book, this is a couple years old now, but it's very good. It's one of the best presents I ever got from my dad. Rioja, right there. Right there. This is nice and juicy. This is really nice. It's really, really juicy. It feels like it's like if you were biting into like a juicy plum or a juicy cherry. But there's a lot of like of wood intensity to it. It's not like super vanilla. There is some vanilla. There's definitely vanilla. But it's very well integrated. I really like this a lot. Stylistically, I could even do with a little bit less vanilla, but it's actually really like for the style and for trying to keep some traditional influence. It's really phenomenal. In 2014, I'm not certain with Spain, but I know that 2014 was not a perfect year, so that's pretty cool. Now 2012 was a good year, so let's see this stuff. Whoa, super different. So the 2014, and look, let's see if we can take a look here at the colors. So you can see that the 2014 has much more red to it. The 2014, other way around. Sorry, 2014 has a lot more red color to it, whereas the 2012, it's deeper. It's deeper. It's more like a plum like. There's more purple color to it. It's interesting on the flavor between these two wines. This one is much more subtle and much more delicate. Like if you were to describe these terms in sort of, and this is used actually a lot in the wine world, it's just kind of an interesting overlap. This is a much more masculine wine, and this is a much more feminine one. So this doesn't have the big bold vanilla or even the big bold fruit. The fruit is more like a black currant, like a very subtle kind of approach. And it's interesting because you do have these different years, but this just has, these were probably released almost at the same time. This one was probably released a year later. So it's pretty, actually, no, wait, this would have been released in 2017. Yeah, this would have been released in 2016. So it's pretty interesting. I'm going to take one more of this. That's silky. You got juicy and you got silky. This is fun. I like this this specificity. All right. You guys are welcome to, let me just check these wine questions. If you have any more wine questions, you can shoot it to me, and then I'm going to go into the COVID stuff. So, best wine for sangria? Really anything cheap and fruity. I mean, you could use Carlo Rossi, right? Carlo Rossi would work for sangria. I've used. I mean, the thing is with sangria, with any kind of wine, if you're gonna do cooking, you can use a wine that's past its prime. It's not good to drink. When it comes to sangria, you don't want to use a wine past its prime, probably, because you still want to get brightness. but the wine does not have to be good. I would say that for sangria, you probably don't want to get a wine that has oak treatment. I would be cautious about some wines from the New World, especially California, with that, just because they put a lot of oak chips, which just like huge amounts of vanilla that are completely unintegrated with the wine, and they do that because it covers up the fact that they have all sorts of things like birds and all sorts of random crap that they pressed in with the wine. And I'm not joking about that, by the way. When you have mass scale winemaking, there's tons of stuff that get pressed into that wine that you probably wouldn't want in there. So, but yeah, I suppose the point of that is that the wine should be fruity, mostly fruit forward. So a Malbec would be really good. A Malbec would be really phenomenal for that, and they're not too expensive. Let's see here. Anything else? Any other questions? Nope. All right, we're gonna go on to the COVID questions. So we're gonna tackle some of just the smaller things first. The Taiwan leader assassinated. Not good. Not good. More stuff going on with China in that sense. We have the dam, which looks like it's getting worse and worse in China. Some people saying it's going to be just a couple more weeks. You have the whole big dick anon thing, which this is an interesting thing. I don't know if I talked about it before, but this idea that there's something else beneath the dam. This is like the gateway to hell, and that the Chinese have actually been feeding things over there. I don't really know what to think about this big dick anon thing, right? I don't know what to think about it. It's about to start raining, which is fine. We're still going, even though it's raining. But I gotta just move some stuff. If you don't bear with me for a second here. Just gotta move a few things. A storm is coming. A storm. It's just, this one should be pretty crazy too. But don't you worry. I'm in an alcove. We're gonna be safe. Be safe and sound. In a little alcove. All right. Let me just move over a little bit. Okay. So where was I? I was talking about Big Dick Anon, right? So Big Dick Anon, he's like this time traveler who is basically predicting. I mean, it sounds like he's predicting Revelation timeline, that we're going to be going through years of tribulation, and he claims that we're going to be hitting some bad stuff, some Mad Max situations. And he claims also that there's a lot of stuff with that dam, that stuff's going to come out of that, and it's going to usher in that era. It's just tough to tell. It's tough to tell. Here's the thing. I was introduced by one of my clients to a thread that went back to 2016, 2017, and it was on, 4chan, which, I can't go on to. I can't. This stuff makes me like sometimes schizophrenic just thinking about trying to sort through all this stuff. But you have someone here who was talking like insider and talking about stuff. And here's the thing. You don't know what you're receiving on these channels. You don't know what you're receiving. That guy, whose name I can't recall, what he was called, what he was termed as, but he was clearly in the know. A lot of the things that he said, though, were not true, and in hindsight, in particular, look like psyops. They look like they were designed to push people in a certain direction, like by basically saying, "Oh, Trump's not going to be able to do anything, and it's all kind of rigged, and you guys aren't ready," right? And so, Big Dick Anon is Big Dick Anon another one of these soft psyops? What's the sort of thing here, right? I don't know. But I think it's important for us to just consume these things and to just see what we got going on with it. But the dam's going to be an issue. The big stuff, though, okay. The big stuff. So speaking of being schizophrenic, right? Speaking of being schizophrenic, So I watched when I was on my hike. I listened to this guy who's going on about gematria, and I have to say, first off, you got to get a read for people's energy. This guy was, really upset people weren't paying attention to him, and he spent most of the time talking about how right he was about things. And these are always flags for me, I have to just say. Um, I think it's, of course, okay to rep the fact that you've been right. I think you have to do it. Hey, like we were talking about 2 months ago, right? About the riots. People were like, Trump's got to do stuff. Trump's got to do stuff. And we were talking here and we were saying, this isn't really a smart move for Trump to do right now. Trump should give them enough rope to hang themselves. And that's exactly what happened. Now, of course, these commentators who were freaking out about that say Trump's not going to win. Now they're like, Trump's going to win. It's like, but whatever. This is their job. Their job's to spin. I mean, I do this like weekly COVID thing as a fun little get together, and I don't make any money from it. But there are people who are invested in controlling your mind and trying to get your attention all the time. So of course they're going to play it into the drama, even if they're not that dumb. But whatever. Digressions aside here. What was that? God, what the fuck was I talking about? Oh yeah, this person with the gematria, and he was going through all of these he was talking about sports games, and this is the stuff that to be honest, that people who follow Q or any of that stuff get made fun of the most for, because you actually can sound like a complete psycho when you start saying, like, when you start reading into every number. And I want to emphasize, I'm not even saying it's wrong, but when you see people like plugging in everything into gematria, and it's like, this equals like 69, and this equals 52, and this means this, and they did 52 here, and then this storm's name, if you put in gematria, is also 52, and they start saying this stuff, and it starts to look pretty crazy. So I felt like I was going insane. I don't even know who Zach Hubbard is. I don't know who Zach Hubbard is, but interesting. You tell me who he is. But this maybe the gematria guy, maybe it was Zach Hubbard. I didn't even check the name of the video I was sent. People send me stuff and I can't watch all of it, but I try to, when I have an opportunity, like a 14-mile walk, like I get 4.5 hours on my phone, so I'm gonna listen to things. Yeah, I mean, but the point here, like, without going into the rabbit hole, is him talking about Chadwick Boseman, okay? And this is where I think that if we stay a little bit shallow, we can wade into these waters, okay? Chadwick Boseman, okay? So Chadwick Boseman, who played character in Black Panther, and he also played Jackie Robinson, okay? Jackie Robinson, civil rights baseball player, had on his jersey 42. He died at the age of 42. Bunch of stuff with dates add up to 42. And Chadwick Boseman, same thing, died on Jackie Robinson Day. They moved the date, right? But he died on that date that they moved it to, and he's 42, and he was playing Jackie Robinson. Okay, so why does this matter? Like, well, what is the significance of 42? Now, apparently, the significance of 42 is that 42 is associated with a lot of black things. Apparently, in gematria, Negro, the N word, right? All these things are on, Rasta. Apparently, a lot of these different things are 42, and that there's a couple other numbers also related to it, but that these things are all used as spell casting. And so the guy was going into stuff with Kobe Bryant and Kobe Bryant's death, and the timing of that, the exact date, the exact street and everything, where he died in a field, but they reported at like 4,200. I mean, I have to say it's not really my cup of tea to get into gematria, and I really did feel like I was going insane listening to some parts of this. And if I feel like I'm going insane listening to some parts of this, then use some caution, especially when they talk about how everything is rigged. every sports game's rigged. And I can put some context here about, or some perspective about why this could be true and why this maybe doesn't seem true. Okay? Because if the game is, so this guy was saying that all these games were rigged and that the cabal rigs everything, right? And even storms are rigged because of names of hurricanes and just names of hurricanes and hurricane itself and all this stuff is like wrapped up with another number, okay, whatever, and that he could predict storm dates based on this stuff. The point of all these kind of things, right? Why am I talking about all these different number stuff and what does it mean? On a linear level, if you're trying to say a sports game is rigged every single time that all the players are in on it, it's completely incomprehensible. Like, there's just no way that that's true. There's no way it's true. There's no way it's true. But if you look at it from the perspective, oh shit, man, don't freak me out like that. Don't freak me out with the 42 people. Yeah, we got 43 now. That's good. Let's keep at 43. No one can leave. No one can leave. Honestly, I don't know who did the video, but he was pessimistic and he was ego-centered. So I'm not necessarily about him, right? As a result of that, I'm not really about him. But it is true that the stuff with Jackie Robinson is, or should I say, Chadwick Boseman is way too much of a coincidence. Like, he was also saying, colon cancer and colon, how they all hit the same sort of gematria number as well. So yeah, maybe it's BS. I don't know, but the way that I could see that maybe there was some truth to this is that it was on a spell casting level. So you wouldn't, in a third dimensional aspect, be saying that it was rigged in the sense that people were doing things in order to lose a game. Like, you watch a professional sports game and like, how are you supposed to script a throw with that you can't do it. You can't do it. But what you could maybe do is you could be casting spells around it that certain outcomes would occur because you had access to the 4D matrix or whatever. That's the only way I can reconcile it, because as one of you guys said just a little bit ago, the only way that you can possibly think of these games being rigged on a third dimensional level is by officiating. Maybe you could bribe one or two players, but you can't bribe like two football teams. You can't do that, and you can't script every play. Like, so if that's what someone's saying, then they gotta like really take a step back, because they're completely losing perspective. If they're trying to say it's scripted energetically and that there's some spells being cast, then we can continue to keep an open mind about it, and I could maybe even be on board with that. But you just can't simply say that all this stuff just happens with the players all being on it. Like, you just sound like a complete retard. And yeah, and I'm not even like an athlete. Yeah, exactly. A singular sport like boxing, something where there's less players, it's individuals, then you can bribe a player. Totally. But to try to bribe a team sport, you can't do that. But maybe the owners are in on this entire thing on an energetic level because of all the sketchy stuff. Who knows? Anyway, that's kind of interesting, though, because clearly some kind of sacrifice went on with Chadwick Boseman. Clearly some kind of sacrifice occurred, and they do this kind of stuff to feed into the energy to feed their sort of system, feed their sort of narrative. Now, which will bring us to like our main course for today, which is the riots, right? The riots and the intensification. Okay, we have Kyle Rittenhouse. I don't know if I talked about Kyle Rittenhouse. Days kind of blur together. mean, total hero, like total hero. This is like a good kid out there, stayed around, cleaned up graffiti, gets attacked by. I mean, I think some of the people in Frog Twitter or BAP said it best. It's like like this guy shoots and like kills like a pedophile, kills somebody who's been a convicted felon, domestic abuser, and it's just like, I mean, anyone who watches the videos of him in that situation, like, mad respect for him, mad respect for him, mad respect for him. But it just, things are intensifying. Things are intensifying. So this is the question. It's like, well, where are things going? And there's a lot of predictive programming going on. So first off, you had the fact that they wanted Trump to respond to these riots, and he didn't do it. So now their plan's fucked. And so now they're trying to say, well, Trump is actually causing the riots. Trump's causing the riots when, no one in the country buys that. Like maybe okay, maybe a quarter of the country buys it because they could literally be told to walk off a cliff to kill Trump, and they do it. You could actually. I'm being serious here. I'm being serious. There is a sizable percentage, like maybe 10% of this country. If you were to tell them, you need to light yourself on fire to stop Trump, or he's going to ruin everything, people would do it. There are people who would do it. There are people who are so programmed that they would kill themselves. They would kill themselves, especially if the proper pressure, social pressure was put on them. They'd do it. And maybe you don't even have to go so far as that, but if you said that they had to start giving away their money, have to start giving away things, like literally targeting people and saying, if you don't give it away, then there are people who would do it. So maybe I shouldn't be so bold as to say that no one would believe it. No one believes it. But most people don't believe it. Most people don't believe it because it's pretty absurd on the face. You have you have Biden and Harris both saying, like, talking about the fact that they supported the riots. Yeah, exactly. If they took it step by step, they could get people to that point. They could get some people to that point. There's a certain percentage of people who are like not salvageable. I hate to say it, they're just not salvageable, and it doesn't mean it's like just it is what it is. But if you ever meet somebody like that and you're interacting with them, like don't interact with them. Like just get away from them because you're dealing with a crazy person, and you're gonna have to be put in a situation like Kyle Rittenhouse, where all you can do is kill them to stop them from doing something to you. So that's why I really recommend you guys be very judicious with what you decide to go to, because it's not necessary to get involved with these people. I do think, I mean, it's kind of, I don't want to go down the wrong sort of language, but some of these Antifa people, I mean, they're really like subhuman. I mean, really, they're people who have been let out of prisons. There is something that's just not, yeah, I mean, yeah. So anyway, okay, so perspective here. So their plan didn't work, and now they're fucked. So what is their plan? Well, their plan was always this, frankly. Their plan was always, I don't think that they ever thought that they would get Trump out of office. That would be wonderful for them. I don't think they ever thought it could occur. Their goal is to try to create a civil war. And we've talked about this before, but that's what they're doing. And the predictive programming is already out there. Like now they're saying Trump may look like he wins a landslide on election night, but in a couple of days after the election, when the mail-in ballots come in, then Trump's not going to win the election. And so they're already trying to tell you that, oh yeah, expect him to win on election night, but he's actually not going to win in the end. And of course, the objective of that, like, do you think that us and the Cube people or whatever, like, sorry, we're not going to be accepting those results. We're not. No one's going to be accepting those results. And so, if that succeeds, and that can't be blown up, like that's what they want. They want it to go into a civil war. They want their brainwashed people, who many of whom are very good. Many of whom are very good. Many of them are very good people, right? They're just a little bit brainwashed. But this is what they're trying to say already. They're trying to get their own side to not accept the election results, and of course, to have our side not accept the election results. They're trying to get no one to accept the election results, to disagree upon it, which is, of course, the perfect premise for a civil war. It was apparently pretty close to happening last time, but there was enough. I think that the military must have, from what I understand, from what I heard, the military kind of stepped in and they decided that they didn't have really a card to play in that sense, because they were too cocky. They thought they were going to win too much. So anyway, so this is where they're going with it. I'm not sure. Back to 42. I don't really have anything else to say about 42. Oh, the numbers. Yeah, the followers. So, guys, I mean, this is the big thing here. I mean, you can compare the conventions, and I admit I didn't watch a ton of the DNC, because I don't like swallowing poison. I mean, I watched parts of it, and I just was very, very cringy, very, very cringy. Like, not even like scary, just like cringy. And I did watch part of the RNC, and I have to say, like, I don't even really like this stuff. Like, I watched it. Got my boomer parents here, and they actually got a little bit annoyed at me because I was falling asleep. I don't like this kind of stuff. I don't like these conventions. It's very 3D to me. Most of the speeches are just kind of political speeches, and it's whatever. But some are really powerful, with like the abortion, the former abortion activist. And I had a client whose girlfriend killed their baby, and then got really deep into Planned Parenthood, and basically the whole thing with that was that she had, like, in order to move through the ranks, you have to kill your baby. So it was pretty dark and pretty fucked up. Yeah, but I mean, but at the same time, RNC was fine, and the positivity was clearly there. I mean, there was clearly a contrast between the two things. So the point here is that there's no way it's going anywhere else except by fraud. That's the only thing that could happen. Maybe the election doesn't occur; it still could be in the timeline. I think it will occur. I feel more like it'll occur than I did last time. But guys, it's going to get rough. September is just starting up. You got the whole thing with Pelosi in the salon. Wait, so there was an eviction moratorium? So now people are not going to get evicted? Is that what's happening? I didn't hear about that. I did hear about Cuomo threatening Trump, saying you're going to need an army to get in here. Well, fortunately, he's the commander-in-chief of the United States Army, so it shouldn't be too difficult. All right, well, that moratorium on that stuff is big, because that was what they were counting on, big riots, more and more riots. But people are tired of the riots. I mean, they are completely tired of the riots. And yeah, we do have the directive of the CDC about getting the nursing home numbers out there from the states. Cuomo saying, "Oh, we're not gonna get those numbers until we got a problem. We can't get those numbers until 2 days after the election." It's just, they're not in a good place. I think the timeline is getting better. I think the timeline's getting better since we last talked. We'll see. They've got more tricks up their sleeve, and there's plenty of negative energy. There's plenty of negative energy out there, but yeah, guys, we just gotta. The last little point here I want to make before I'll take some. Actually, there is another question I was asked before, but you guys can post questions afterwards. But how do I say this? We have to hold the field for there not to be a civil war. Okay, the trap, and I see people in our corner get into it, and I think it's totally legit to be prepped for it. Like, you don't want to pretend that they're not trying to make a civil war happen. Of course they're trying to make a civil war happen. You have to be aware of it. You don't want to feed into the energy that there is going to be a civil war. You don't want to feed into the energy that you're going to have to fight people. I mean, the vast majority of people are not who are pulled into this. I would say of the left right now, probably a solid 3/4. You could easily say a solid 3/4 are good people, who have their resentment pockets and stuff. But you know, they're fundamentally good people, and they might probably they give too much to others, and they have their distortions. There's no question about it, and the propagandas convince them of things. But I would only say, like, we're only looking at maybe like 10% of the public, maybe 10 to maximum 20 of the entire public that are really like awful people. I don't think it's that high. I think like 10% is about as much as you can do. There's severely damaged demonic individuals, people who are either feeding on that satanic energy, or have completely given themselves up to it. So stay above this. Yeah, stay above the hostility. Stay above this fight. Like, when I see friends and family fall into it, the trap is like getting angry and yelling at them and pushing them away. Whereas the way you want to handle it is you want to be like, you may not believe me and it's okay, but we're on the same team. Really, there's this other thing that's going on. We're on the same team. And I understand that maybe you don't see that, and you don't have to believe it if you don't want to. But you remove yourself from the polarization. And so they have a harder and harder time of trying to fight you, because you're no longer making it into this left-right dichotomy. It's important to understand that while communism left-hand path, and it goes down to a extremely dark path, a very satanic path, a lot of those people who are there are only there because they have actually a lot of love, and their love is being manipulated. A lot of them are there for that. A lot of them are there for status. They have those pockets. How do you explain it to a simpletons? Well, I would not attempt to. Yeah, exactly. That's it. Hibernius answered it for me. I mean, you drop seeds around for them, and if they start to bring stuff up, you just say, look, I'm not. It's like, do you want to know about this? Are you sure you want to know about this, right? You let them. They have to do their own research. It's the same with coaching, right? For me, I get people who are like, oh, you got to help out my friend. They're really bad with women. It's like, I can help that person 0%, because they have no interest. They have no interest. They have absolutely no interest in trying to make a difference with it. They have no interest in any of that stuff. So you just have to. So an effective way to start off the conversation depends on the individual and what they care about. I pace my lefty friends, guy friends, mostly about the environment, mostly about corruption in big pharma, mostly about corruption in the banks, human trafficking. Those are all things that are pretty universal. For the left in particular. I mean, when you talk about environmental pollution, when you talk about money laundering and just the Federal Reserve printing money, when you talk about all that stuff, I mean, and also warmongering, I mean, there's plenty of things. The left, like I've said this before, the left has been against, a lot of the people on the left have been against this stuff for a long time, and they've just been flipped recently. Just only recently have they been the ones mostly targeted by the PSYOP. Republicans were targeted by it during the Bush years. And that's the problem. The problem is the labels, right? I mentioned this in a tweet. The biggest thing, if people can like learn anything about discernment, it's you cannot trust the label, right? That's like on multiple levels. You can't trust the label on your food. You can't trust the label on anything. They say this is natural. You can't trust that. What do you mean by natural? Oh, I'm Republican. What do you mean by Republican? Do you mean that you like fuck little boys? Is that what you mean? Because Q just dropped the whole list of Republicans who are sex offenders. Republican politicians who are sex offenders. Screenshot that Q drop. Someone goes at you on the left against Q and say, "Does this sound like a right wing conspiracy?" That's a good way to do it. It's like we are not in this position. It's not about left versus right. It's about weeding out the corruption. Weeding out the corruption, weeding out these evil people. And they're across the spectrum. Trump got in on the Republican Party, and so he was able to persuade Republicans easier to adopt his platform. There are still plenty of Republicans who are going to vote for Trump who are, in a certain sense, as brainwashed as the left. They're still stuck in the polarity. Maybe they don't even like Trump, but they're going to vote for him because they're Republican. And that's fine for the purposes of the third dimension. But it's kind of like they're on the right side of convenience because you could flip the script and that's a really good question for yourself. If Trump was a Democrat and the other party was Republican, how many people how many people would and the rhetoric was a bit different as a result of that. The rhetoric was a bit different, but he was doing the same stuff fundamentally. How many people on the right in like our corner, how many people on the right would be with him? It's a good test of your ability to discern, and a good test of your ability to be objective if you, in all honesty, would feel like you could, that you would still be on the Trump train, right? Even though the rhetoric would be closer to Bernie on a lot of things. The rhetoric would be very different, okay? The actions would be almost the same, but the rhetoric would be very different. How many of us would like that? So we have to be sympathetic to the fact that this occurs. Anyway, we got some fun times ahead of us. I remain as optimistic as ever about the trajectory of things. You guys got to stay the course. Just stay positive. Stay above the polarity. We're gonna make it. We're gonna make it. What questions do we have? We got any questions? You guys asked the questions. I have one other thing I have to answer because I was asked a question earlier, and the question was about the founding fathers and the founding fathers. What were they doing with the cabal? What's the sort of situation with that? So, because there's a lot of people who say the founding fathers were, they were Freemasons, right? They were Freemasons, and therefore, yeah, I have to say this, Robin. I don't feel that scenario either. I don't feel it. I don't feel it. Maybe it's a different timeline than ours. I don't feel it. Feels like a psyop to me. It feels like a little bit of a psyop, but I do think that dam will probably break, though, and I don't know what that means. Who knows? I did see that pregnant woman arrested in Australia. Guys, I hate to say it, and we can complain about the stuff in America. We can complain about the fact that Rittenhouse is getting charged by the DA, even though he's going to get off with no charges probably at this point, not even the possession of a gun charge. America's Constitution. This is actually a good segue. Well, I'll just say this. It's cabal fall. Cabal fall. But this is a good segue. It's a good segue because the founding fathers created a system that was designed. It was designed completely against the cabal. And so the founding fathers, what were the things the founding fathers had a big issue with? They had a big issue with England and the autonomy situation. And they had a different vision. So you see a lot of the stuff that the founding fathers were Freemasons, and that's true. However, it's important to understand that in a lot of these organizations, there's actually two paths that are taken. There's the left-hand path and there's the right-hand path. We talked about that a bit in the last Periscope. But those who go on the right-hand path, like the founding fathers were obviously in a pro-liberty sort of situation. And they designed the country they understood these threats on a level. If you read a lot of their correspondence and you read the papers and their issues with Catholic, people are like, oh, they didn't like Catholics. They were, you know, they were like low level, consciousness. It's like, yeah, the people who created the only document in the world at that time that enshrined universal human rights and separation of powers, yeah, they were low consciousness. Okay. The reason that they had issues with Catholics immigrating to the United States is because they understood the Jesuits and they understood the Pope. They understood the infiltration that occurs when the Catholic Church goes someplace because the Catholic Church itself was infiltrated. So the founding fathers knew that what they were doing was an experiment and it was against the cabal. And they knew, I think that they knew that it was probably going to fail. Or in the sense that it wasn't going to fail, but that it was going to be tested. They knew that it wasn't going to be like there was a long fight ahead. They had a continent away from the cabal, except for Canada, which is a big problem. And you see a lot of the issues with the US and the Great Britain revolved around Canada because the founding fathers wanted Canada out of the picture. They wanted to bring Canada into the Union because they wanted to remove a base from which the cabal could be in this part of the world. They were trying to quarantine off parts of the world. Like, I hope people understand this. People sound retarded when they talk about the founding fathers like, oh, they were Freemasons, so they were involved with the cabal. You sound like a fucking idiot because it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Why would you design a system that is completely antithetical to everything that the cabal tries to do? Why would you do that if you were part of the cabal? They left it. They left it. That was the whole point. They were intelligent people who had been initiated and they didn't like the direction of it. And when they couldn't negotiate internally anymore, they broke off and they tried to create a different section of the world that would be immune to it. Now, I imagine that they discovered the cabal's power over it because I imagine they were involved with it. They were all Freemasons. They had a split. And gradually America got more and more brought into it, more and more subverted. Mostly Civil War onward. That's when the subversion occurred. And now we're reclaiming it back again. Well, I don't even know if it's it's when you say the Freemasons infiltrated, when you go through these levels, and I want to emphasize I'm speculating here because I haven't gone through these levels, but I've read enough about it that I think I have a general picture. You get initiated into deeper and deeper levels of esoteric knowledge, and at a certain point you reach a point where it's like, how am I going to use this knowledge? Am I going to use this knowledge for personal gain and personal gratification and power, or am I going to use this knowledge as a form of surrender to sort of serve the will? And you have this path split, the left and right path. And so that's what happened with America in my perspective. Now, guys, I hate to say it, but getting called for dinner. So I'm going to have to cut this one off abruptly. But we'll talk soon. All right. See ya.